Welcome to Weighed in the Balance, the show where we examine to see if claims can hold up to scrutiny. Today I am joined once again by Matthew Duraski, Providence Presbytery. If you all haven't seen his speech, go look at the PCA General Assembly live stream and listen to Mr. Duraski's speech arguing for our study committee on Christian nationalism. It was great, and it's good to have you on the show again.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate that. Yes, if you want to, I would appreciate it if you want to dig through 3 hours of evening business from the last day of GA. I am in there for 3 minutes. If I could speak to that for like 30 seconds, that was one of the scariest things that I've done in several months. And it doesn't sound that bad. You're just standing up there and talking. But when you're at the microphone and you understand that like 2,000 of your peers who are not all friendly to you are listening to what you say, it becomes quite frightening. You can kind of see my hand shaking a little, like as I'm holding my manuscript during the speech, but it's because I was really scared, and then, thank you Lord, I hit it. I went down to the 0.00 like time. I hit it, I got done, and I was out. And then I don't remember what happened for the next like 5 minutes after that because I was so like hopped up on adrenaline.
Yeah. Well, so that was your first time speaking on the floor, and you didn't make anybody mad. My first time, like, I think that teaching Elder Tipton was actually angry at me.
That's awesome.
He ended up, like, we talked later, and he was cool, but like there on Tuesday night, because he had an omnibus motion of 2 items, but anybody who asks can have 1 item removed from an omnibus motion.
Yeah.
And so I asked for an item to be removed, and
from the omnibus of 2, which makes it,
and like you could tell, like, he was frustrated, like he was trying to save a little bit of time, and of course I was arguing against allowing calling the question, which was a doomed effort if there ever was one at the PCA General Assembly. But no, I thought you did good, and like, it's best in those situations to just have the attitude of The Wedding Singer, if you remember that movie, where there's he's singing at the wedding right after his fiance leaves him at the altar, and he gets to talking because he's sad, and I think the father of the bride or somebody at the reception stands up and tells him, you know, we didn't pay you to talk, we paid you to sing. And he said, well, that's very nice, sir, but the thing is, I have the microphone, so you will listen to every single word I have to say. That's the attitude.
That's actually a good illustration of the entirety of GA. It's really kind of that attitude.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, not everybody who comes to the mic, I think, needs to speak. I tried to be as short and concise as I could. Actually, I spoke way more than I had intended to at the General Assembly, but when, having been on the Review of Presbytery Records Committee, when people started standing up and like making motions against what we did, which is of course what debate is there for.
Sure.
But it was just like, I was like,
well, that to me, because you were often very short at the mic, like you were up there for like 20 seconds. Usually, I mean, at least what I saw of you up there seemed like you were more pointing out little corrections or clarifications, or even just procedural things. You know, like, hey, do we need to do this in this way, or can we think through this action in this different way? Just little stuff like that. I didn't really sense that you were planting a flag and giving a big rah-rah speech for some cause. It was more like small pieces that needed to be understood so that you could vote properly.
Yeah, well, that is good. I think you're referencing the time when, because there was, and like 5 people are going to get this part of the discussion,
That's
I
okay.
realize this, but there was a recommendation from Overtures that we answer an overture by postponing indefinitely, and I was just like, I've read Robert's Rules for Dummies, because it's on my bookshelf, it's right over there.
Yeah, mine is right there.
Yes, because you had Rod Culbertson for
That's it,
holiday,
yes.
yeah. I was like, I've read Robert's Rules for Dummies. Postpone indefinitely is a way to vote no without voting no. Why wouldn't we just vote no? Like,
it seems more polite, I guess.
Yeah, that's really what that question was about. Was like, if you're wanting to postpone it to next year, like defer to next year. Like, postpone indefinitely is a way to just not do it at all. But yeah, GA was a lot of fun this year. And
Yeah.
I will put on my resume now that I went toe-to-toe with Sean Lucas in a
You
debate.
should, absolutely.
And my side won.
Well, that should be on a certificate in your office somewhere. I'm just saying. Also, before we move into the main of our discussion, I want to comment that we were talking about this before we hit record. That you have given an answer to my Auburn attire from the last episode.
Yes.
With your Tennessee orange there.
We were up at SEC Media Days yesterday, so it was on my mind.
Yeah. Also, the Vols have the fortunate favor that they do for me and my little community in that occasionally y'all will beat Alabama. And Auburn is not capable of that right now, so it's much appreciated.
Since you got rid of Gus, y'all need to call him back.
Yeah. Well, this isn't a football podcast, but I have so many thoughts about that.
Send Hugh Freeze back to my alma mater. He was behaving himself. And so, as long as he can behave himself, we'll take him back at Liberty. Mm-hmm. And you guys can get Gus back, and,
And all would be right.
Yes.
We have not had a winning season since we fired Gus. This will be our 6th year since he got fired. Not a football podcast. Hindsight's 20/20 on that one.
But we both live in the South, and so it is always in the milieu.
Yeah. If you have a pulse in the South, you're expected to pick a football team. We have a guy who just got hired on as our senior pastor, thank the Lord. And I asked him, hey man, Auburn or Alabama? And he said, I went to Virginia actually. And I said, no, you don't understand. If you're going to live in suburban North Alabama, you have to choose one. So, work in progress there, but we'll see.
So early on when I was here, I don't even remember why I was using this sermon illustration, but I used a sermon illustration about when I was in marching band in college. And the fact that we had not only our class 3 days a week, but then every Saturday that there was a home game, we had a full rehearsal that morning prior to all of the pregame festivities and kickoff and everything. And like I said, I don't remember why I brought it up, but the point of that story is I did not enjoy it at all.
Yeah.
And it sort of it made no sense to me because Liberty at the time wasn't a big football school. They had won what were we in? The Big South, I want to say at the time. Okay, but that was FCS. They were not in the FBS, and they were still sort of mid-tier FCS at the time. But the way I expressed it in the sermon was I was like, I didn't go to a big football school. It's not like I went to Alabama or something like that. And I had a lady come through the line, because I go to the back of the sanctuary and talk to everybody as they're leaving.
As they're leaving, yeah.
And this lady came to me and said, don't ever use Alabama as the example of a football school ever again. I was like, well, I didn't say I liked Alabama. I said that their football program
They're a big school, yeah, which you can admit, but as an Auburn fan, I will not say that we should have that level of sensitivity, but I do understand it.
She was joking, but...
Okay, yeah. Yeah. When they, so unrelated, but when they released the Roll Tide War Eagle ESPN 30 for 30 documentary about the rivalry, they actually, there were people who complained to ESPN in the ordering of the title. I actually think it's called War Eagle Roll Tide, and I think there were Bama fans that were mad that it was War Eagle Roll Tide instead of Roll Tide War Eagle. And I guarantee you, if it had been Roll Tide War Eagle, Auburn fans would have called to complain for the exact same reason. It's intense. But also, Yeah, go ahead.
I will just say, I remember when I was a kid, I thought that beating Alabama is just what we did. Because I was born in 1991, where we were in the midst of a losing streak to Alabama when I was born, but I was not yet 4 years old when Peyton to Joey Kent on play number 1 happened in 1995. And I just thought that's what we did. Florida was the team that I was.
Okay.
Yeah. But so I cannot wait for that to get back to the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
All you Alabama fans can come at me in the comments.
That's right. My parents grew up they were in college in the 70s. And so I actually So when I was a kid, Auburn would beat Alabama pretty regularly. We had the 6 in a row, like when I was in middle school to high school, I think.
The fear of the thumb.
That's right, the fear of the thumb, and then the fear of the index finger is what it became. But I just had it drilled into me by my parents who lived through the '70s Auburn teams that beating Alabama was it was special. Like, you could not take it for granted. So, like, even though we beat them, and I was happy we beat them, it felt every time like life was on the line.
Yeah. No, I remember when we started losing to Alabama, because, like, so in 2001, you can probably find this online. Philip Fulmer in the locker room saying, giving the speech after they beat Alabama, and he said, "And what a great job by our seniors who have never lost to Alabama." Like, he owned Alabama through the mid to late 90s and into the early 2000s. And I remember when we lost to them in 2002. And that was like a sky is falling moment. Even though that was a winning season, we went to a good bowl at the end of it, I think. But, like, from the perspective of folks around here, it was like we were supposed to finally get our national championship that LSU stole from us last year. Like, and now we've lost to Florida, Georgia, and Alabama all in the same year. Like, it was...
That's rough. And that of course raises the perennial football question of, if you had to choose between having only wins except against your biggest rival or only losses except for your biggest rival, which one do you choose? I don't know anybody who can answer that, like, confidently.
So it depends on how your team is doing at the time, because in 2002, like, a 3-loss season, that was awful. And, like, the old timers would have to remind us, like, no, I remember 1988 when we didn't even make a bowl game. But for everybody my age, it was like, what are you talking about? We always make a bowl game. Like, we need to be getting back to Atlanta and going to win another national championship. Like, that was the mindset. But then, so put that attitude, though, in, like, 2018, 2020, and where you're like, we might win 4 games this year, but goodness, one of them needs to be against Florida.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's the last thing I'll say about football, I promise, and then we can actually talk about Catholicism. But the only thing I can say about Auburn and Tennessee right now is that we're kind of doing, like, you guys are doing like this and we're doing like this. And I'm really hoping, with all my due respect to the University of Tennessee football program, I don't want to go through the, like, 15-year period that y'all went through. And I am really scared that that's where we're going as a team.
Well, it is so unfortunate that Alex Lott couldn't jump on. I invited him to jump on with us today.
Yeah.
But he was tied up all day, because he and I just had a conversation about this a week or so ago, because I think it was ESPN, I forget who, but they did, like, the 10 worst college football hires of the past whatever, and 2 Tennessee hires were on it. What was interesting, though, was the order that they were in. Jeremy Pruitt was way near the top of the list.
Okay.
And Derek Dooley was near the bottom of the list. And he texted me, he's like, no context, he just said, which hire do you think was worse, Derek Dooley or Jeremy Pruitt? And I said, it's Derek Dooley.
Yeah.
At the time, we were, 2 years removed from going to Atlanta? Like, we had just had, I mean, it was a 7-5 year, but that was a 7-5 year on the heels of a year where we lost to Wyoming. Like, the program was still good. Like,
sure.
Fundamentals were sound, but, we were rebuilding. And then Lane left us in the middle of the night. If we had hired David Cutcliffe, then we probably don't have the decade of awfulness. But instead, we hired Derek Dooley, and who didn't have a winning season in 3 years. That's the other thing. Pruitt, for all of his, like,
Pruittness,
for all of his bumbling idiotness and, like, or idiocy, and, like, paying recruits in Chick-fil-A bags, like, he still managed to go 7-5 one year.
Sure.
Like, the best Dooley ever did was 6-6.
Yeah.
But
in his defense,
I highly recommend, don't hire Derek Dooley.
Yeah. Hopefully that ship has sailed for everyone. But in defense of Pruitt paying people in Chick-fil-A bags, that's obviously a very bad look, but it is not unique to him.
No, I mean, he obviously learned it from his previous stops of places where he had...
Where might those have been?
Yeah, I don't know. Places where you are educated, and then places where you are a longtime assistant coach.
Yeah, you might learn a thing or two there.
Yeah.
Also, if I could comment on my own shirt real quick, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Just want to clarify this before someone acts like I'm an arrogant jerk. This t-shirt, you can only see the top. It says predestined, and there's John Calvin with sunglasses on. It's a joke of a shirt. It says to party at the bottom. Predestined to party. So this is not some like arrogant, ooh, I'm one of the elect and I'm so awesome. This is a pun of a t-shirt. Let it be known.
Well, you have to be careful because like people are taking you the wrong way just all over the internet now. Because with your denominations comment, were you intending to say that splitting into several different denominations is something that's just no big deal?
No, that is not what I was intending to say. Thank you for letting me clarify.
Yeah.
My talking about the denominations thing, this is like probably the single like biggest ideological cudgel I see Catholics on the internet use against Protestants. Even more than like you hate Mary, even more than you're in rebellion against the Pope or whatever. The thing I see most parroted against Protestantism is the 44,000 denominations thing. On a side note, that number has actually, like, that fluctuates a little bit. I remember 10 years ago, people would say like 30,000 denominations, and it's not because we got 14,000 new ones in 10 years. It's because the number as a talking point has increased more and more. So my goal was not to say that schismatic behavior is just no problem, or that it's an indifferent matter. My point was to say, more modestly, simply to my Catholic friends, just back off of it a little bit. Because what you reveal when you parrot the 44,000 denominations thing is that you don't understand that a lot of those denominations exist because of historical circumstances. So, should the PCUSA have liberalized, therefore leading to the formation of the OPC? No, they shouldn't have. And you can argue for why that happened. But the OPC and the PCA both exist in the North and South, not because they had a theological fight, but because of the Civil War. So my point is simply to say, when you continue to parrot the 44,000 denominations thing, what you are communicating is that, or what you're implying, is that every single one of those denominations exists because we don't have a top-down magisterium, and therefore there's all this theological chaos. When in reality, a lot of those denominations exist as a function of history and religious liberty. I mean, so my point is not to say that these denominational differences are immaterial or don't matter or whatever. I am making the more modest point that you should back off of using that as a cudgel because so many of those denominations exist for a variety of reasons that are not just theological arguing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And I, in what was probably an imperfect way, what was definitely an imperfect way, because I'm an imperfect person, but I was trying to make that point to a gentleman in our comment section that, like, a lot of times these different denominations exist in the United States because they come from different countries. Mm-hmm. For example, in what's called NAPARC, which I was wrong last time, it's the North American Presbyterian and Reformed Council. I verified it on their website. Yes. Yeah. There are two what are called Continental Reformed denominations in NAPARC. The URCNA, that stands for United Reformed Churches in North America. If you know who Michael Horton is, if you know who R. Scott Clark is, if you know Dr. Kim Riddlebarger, who wrote A Case for Amillennialism, which I have right up there, which convinced me of the error of premillennialism. Those guys are all in the URCNA. There is another denomination called the Reformed Church in the United States, RCUS, and those two denominations have the same confessional standards: the Belgic Confession, the Heidelberg Catechism, and the canons of Dort, what's called the three forms of unity. Mm-hmm. The reason those two denominations are separate is because the URCNA comes from the Netherlands and the RCUS comes from Germany.
Yeah, and I was actually I'm glad you said that, because and you confirmed for me. I wanted to say that Horton's denomination had roots in Dutch Reformed tradition, and I forget the letters for the other one, but the other one had the German Reformed tradition. So you're right. I mean, these things are historical products. They're not automatically just the result of some sort of schismatic fight. So what I want to say about it, or kind of press home, is that schismatic behavior is a problem in Protestantism, I don't think we have to therefore assume that it is an inherently Protestant problem. Because also, if I could go off for half a second, I do think that the unity of Catholicism is sometimes sort of overstated. Like, yeah, you might be within the same, like, big tent, but come on, like, what does a hardcore rad trad have in common? And I'm gonna pull the James Martin lever, but what does a hardcore rad trad and, James Martin, what do they have in common? I mean, literally the only thing that those two parties would have in common is this allegiance to this magisterial authority. But even then, it's hard to see how that is a legitimate unity other than just in terms of lip service. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. We had a comment on one of our shorts recently that YouTube, if you're getting too naughty in the comments, YouTube will like hide your
right. Yeah.
So I have to click on newest first in order to even see it. But we had one guy on the short, like, you think you know Luther, think again. Mm-hmm. Was something like that was the title. And he said, I know Luther. He was a schismatic heretic, and he deserves to be in the flames of perdition.
God have mercy. Okay.
But, so, think about that guy, and then Bishop Robert Barron, who I've brought up on this show before.
Yeah.
That when Ben Shapiro asked him, he basically, I'm paraphrasing now, but he basically said, look, I'm a good Jew. I try to live according to the Torah. I try to spread biblical principles all over the world, but I don't believe in Jesus. Can I still go to heaven? And Bishop Barron said, absolutely, yes, Vatican II is clear. As long as you are following the dictates of your conscience, then you're saved by Jesus indirectly.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And
I'm a little... Oh, I believe you. Yeah, I'm a little surprised to hear Barron kind of go there. Because he has you're probably... I mean, if you did an episode on Barron, we don't have to retread all of that. But...
We talked about literally this clip, but...
Okay. I just know he had a very helpful... What to me was a very helpful and kind of funny Ask Me Anything thread on the r/atheism forum several years ago. And I actually think he handled that very well. My little, my somewhat interest in ecumenism came out a little bit when I was reading that thread because I actually thought he did a good job responding to some very bad faith atheists. But it disappoints me to know that he's telling Ben Shapiro that he doesn't need to repent and turn to Jesus. I mean, I think Paul in Romans 11 and Romans 9 would have something to say about that. I know the Calvinist quoting Romans 9, but it talks about Israel.
Yeah. Well, and think about the difference there. So, someone who is like a rad trad and Robert Barron, and they're in the same communion. They have the same hierarchical structure that they're both subject to. But there's a difference in theology there that's really massive. Mm-hmm. Then the difference between somebody like you or me, somebody like me, that's how English works. Me is the object.
That's right.
Somebody like you or me and John MacArthur, who also was interviewed by Ben Shapiro, who spent the bulk of that interview trying to convince him that he needed to repent and trust in Jesus. Like, John MacArthur could not be ordained in this church. But that guy was, I am so thankful for him and his ministry. Was he wrong sometimes? Absolutely. And when he was wrong, it was bad. Like when he had that whole, like, why every self-respecting Calvinist should be premillennial. Just let me dunk on all the premills.
Well, you're a former premill, so you can speak to that a little better.
Yeah. Or his sermon series on baptism was just like, I've always described it as like when John MacArthur was right, he was right for all of the right reasons, and he did all of his homework, dotted all of his I's, crossed all of his T's. And when he was wrong, it was just bad. Like, that granted, I am so thankful for John MacArthur and his ministry and his sermons. And like, he is a brother in Christ, and he is now in glory. You know, he is now, you might say, one of the souls under the altar that is crying out, how long, O Lord? And you know what? He's being given a white robe and being told to rest a little while until the number of his brothers is complete. And so even though there's a separation between us and people like John MacArthur, we're closer than SSPX and Robert Barron.
Yes, we are. And I think that is a different... those kinds of differences get glossed over in the name of a technical unity where you're paying lip service to the big authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I could talk about J-Mac for half a second. First of all, we're recording this the day after he died, so I do want to be sensitive to that and say, faithful minister, like, I didn't know him personally, but sort of indirectly he influenced me. I always appreciated his relationship with R.C. Sproul. So many good things to say about good old J-Mac. I had my differences with him. I'm not a leaky dispensationalist. I'm not a Baptist.
I don't have to tell your Presbyterian.
That's right. You don't have to ring me up to Presbytery. I'm not a Baptist. I'm not premillennial. And I did have something of a bone to pick with him in the way that he talked about sort of Jesus' physical body, where he would talk about God's blood is sort of a non-starter of a phrase. I disagree with him very strongly on that. But at the same time, I have a hard time looking at this body of ministry that went on for, like 50 years or something like that, and thinking, well, because we're in different denominations, we have no unity with each other. That is imposing what the Catholic thinks a denominational difference is on all of our denominational differences. And it's not the same thing.
Yes.
The difference between, Grace Presbyterian Church, where I'm at right now, and I believe his church was called Grace and Peace out in California.
Grace Community Church.
Grace Community Church, thank you. There's some differences there, but we could show up to each other's churches and worship together and affirm the same gospel, salvation by grace through faith. He could come here and I would happily serve him communion and be in fellowship with him and his family. It's not this sort of radical separation that the Roman Church seems to insist it has to be. I don't think that we have to give that away.
No, because we believe that the visible church is bigger than the PCA.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's even bigger than NAPARC.
Mm-hmm.
My goodness, there are what is the confession says, this visible Catholic Church has been sometimes more, sometimes less visible, and particular churches which are members thereof are sometimes more, sometimes less pure. And so
I'm really glad you had that memorized. That's really helpful.
Yeah. So, heaven help us, there are independent fundamentalist Baptist churches that are part of the visible church. Do they have some impurities, in my view? Absolutely they do. But they are not, the confession also says, outside of the visible church, there is ordinarily no possibility of salvation. But we also define the visible church as larger than our own little group.
Yes, and that is so important. And I think we need to recognize, okay, I am happily Reformed, and I have no intention of changing that. I think that Reformed theology is in the words of Scripture, and I don't apologize for that. However, I think we need to be honest with ourselves and recognize that having the Reformed view that we do is a historical minority position. I don't think that makes us wrong, but I do think we need to know that, the big tent of the Church Catholic, little case C, is beyond merely the most pure theology. I mean, if we only got into heaven based on how pure our theology was, we'd all be doomed. I think that there is more or less pure theology, and I think the best summary of scriptural teaching is found in the Reformed tradition. But I don't think that necessarily means that, I talk to somebody in my office who's not Reformed, they come to my church, I'm not going to tell them yeah, you're a bad Christian, And I think that people get it in their minds that if you are in a different denomination, you must, the way that we must be thinking about them is in terms of anathema and radical difference. And that's just not the case. I mean, it's disingenuous to assume that because I am not Baptist, don't want to be Baptist, I therefore think that Baptists are anathema. That is perhaps how the Catholic Church would treat schismatic groups, but it's not how we're treating schismatic groups.
Yeah, well, and then that's something that, because Alex and I were talking about this last night, and I love that we've been going for over 30 minutes and haven't
gotten to the thing yet.
Whatever. Look, I was on Ryan Beasie's podcast one time, and he sent me an outline before I was on. He's like, we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about this, and I'm going to ask you this question, and then I'm going to play this clip, and I want you to be able to, and when I had him on, I was like, dude, Ryan, I don't do that. I hit record, and we see where it goes.
Yeah. And I would love to get to the clip. We absolutely can get to the clip.
Yeah.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, but Alex and I were talking about this last night, that there have been schisms from the quote-unquote Catholic Church, going all the way back. It's just the Roman Catholic ecclesiology says that once that schism happens, our church didn't split, those people just left. But
that is the Great Schism in a nutshell. But go ahead.
Yeah, or the Great Schism, the Novatianists, the Donatists, the Montanists, the Old Catholics, the Jansenists, like you can...
The Seeds, them too.
Yeah, like none of these are seen as like a problem with Catholicism. It's seen as a problem with those heretics over there. And so, in essence, like I guess the knock against us is that when certain Calvinistic believers in England decided to found what is now the Baptist movement, because it doesn't come from the Anabaptist movement. They're cousins. They're not mother-daughter.
Right.
But like when there were certain Calvinistic believers that said, no, we think you should only baptize believers, the Reformed tradition did not say, well, you know, a pox on your house, anathema to you. like we still recognize them as Christians. There's just a difference there. And so, yeah, the doctrine of the church is that difference is so much bigger, I think, than anybody even lets on when they're having these discussions. But
yeah, and I think it's important to recognize, once again, and historically, the Protestant Reformation was not kind to the Anabaptists. I do think the Anabaptists were, like, literal heretics, so, like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that their theology is pure and they're...
You think somebody that thinks he's the reincarnation of King David is a heretic?
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's so important to recognize that somebody's right and somebody's wrong, right? But that we don't have to be so self-assured that we therefore say you are outside of the faith, which I think is kind of how Catholicism unfortunately views a lot of Protestantism. This isn't just a matter of, well, we think our sacramentology is better than yours, and you are a big dum-dum for believing in Protestantism. If they would just say that we're dum-dums, I wouldn't even necessarily have a problem with that. It's the fact that historically the Catholic Church has said, now I know this changed after Vatican II, but the Catholic Church historically has said, if you believe what you and I believe, we are anathema. We are going to hell. So by being Protestant, we are putting our souls on the line, according to them. And I think that while I have my significant differences with my Protestant brethren, I don't think that it is appropriate for me to stand in that seat of judgment over them. Does that... Yeah, I'm not going to ask if that makes sense because I've already asked that like 7 times, but I hope that is clear.
It gets misunderstood so often, so yeah, no, I do understand what you're saying. I'm sure that the comment section will absolutely understand what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, they're going to be great about it.
Yeah.
I can't wait for them to comment on my ceiling tile as well. But
well, let's see what Alex and Ruslan have to say.
Very good.
We've had naughty popes, we have naughty bishops too.
Yeah.
What they were doing is that they were attaching a monetary transaction to receiving an indulgence.
Right. Bad.
But the Catholic Church has always said, no, you do not sell indulgences.
Right.
You can't sell indulgences.
Right.
Well, the church in Germany, and hey, to this day, the church in Germany is wilding out, bro. The church in Germany is crazy.
Which church?
The Catholic Church in Germany to this day is nuts. Is insane.
Are they schismed?
No, they're not yet. But they're like pushing
Really?
the envelope. Oh yeah. Germany has always had problems. That's
so Germany is on the verge.
Germany has always
of being schism.
Well, actually, recently Pope Francis has kind of like rehabilitated them. Like they were like pushing some like really radical things, and Pope Francis has kind of gotten them to calm down. Because Pope Francis doesn't want another schism, right? Sure. But anyway, so Martin Luther, his problem was with the abuses of indulgences,
charging money for them.
And the Catholic Church said, Luther, you're right. Why is the bishop here? Why are they charging for indulgences? And they went and they stopped it. And they said, Luther, you're right about that, and you're right about...
Okay, so a lot there that didn't sound right.
Yeah.
Has the Roman Catholic Church always said you can't sell indulgences?
To my knowledge, no. That's why I have this stupid grin on my face. So there's a lot to unpack there. I think that the historical reality may be, I haven't like looked into this period of history in a while, so maybe the Catholic Church told, I'm assuming he's referring to Tetzel, you know, and his sale of indulgences. Maybe the Catholic Church told Tetzel to knock it off, because Tetzel was the most crass, I mean, even Catholics would agree, Tetzel's the most crass version of the indulgence issue.
Yeah, he famously, and this made it into the Luther movie if you've seen that, but he famously said, with this indulgence I can redeem the soul of the man who violated the Mother of God herself.
Yep, that is a real thing that he said.
Yeah.
Which is bad, clearly.
Yes.
But my criticism is that I feel like I get different answers from different Catholics when I talk about this issue. So when I was an RUF intern at Jacksonville State in Jacksonville, Alabama, go Gamecocks. That's kind of, I don't know. Anyway, they had a professor there of history who was a dedicated Roman Catholic, sort of a lay minister kind of thing. Very invested in his church. And he was someone that I had a pretty friendly relationship with. He was a really nice guy. And so I asked him many years ago, like, hey, what's up with the indulgences? Doesn't it seem sort of self-evidently bad to suggest that the grace of God is for sale? And I know Catholics wouldn't say that's what an indulgence is, but just for simplicity, I think the average person in Germany or wherever may have understood this to be a transaction by which I buy God's favor. So I asked him, like, what's up with that? Like, what is the rationale, and is this still a thing? And his response to me was basically, if somebody does something great for the church, shouldn't they be rewarded for it? He said, I could still get an, and what he told me is that I could still get an indulgence from the Catholic Church. And if I were to donate a large sum of money, if I were to give away my personal wealth to establish a church or to commission Catholic art or whatever, shouldn't I be rewarded for that? Now that line of thinking, I think there's a logic to it, but that's different from what the gentleman here is saying. He's trying to make it sound like the practice of indulgences was never meant to be a monetary transaction in any way. And I think that's probably not, he probably can't say that with certainty.
No, because, I mean, as we all read in high school, if you had a good English teacher, again, shout out Alex Lott wherever you are.
Yeah.
But no, so my senior year English teacher, his name was Stephen Loop was his name, Mr. Loop. Everybody loved Mr. Loop. Even if you didn't like English class, you liked his English class. And we had to read the prologue to the Canterbury Tales and the Pardoner's Tale, which if you've ever read the Canterbury Tales, it is rough, like, because it's all in couplets.
Okay. I read a little bit of it in high school, but it's been forever.
Yeah. Do you remember what the pardoner was?
I do not. I could take a guess, but I don't remember from my reading what that was.
He was an indulgence seller.
Okay.
And, like, it was this thing where, like, Chaucer made a list of pilgrims that were going to Canterbury and, you know, picks, like, people from different walks of life that his ordinary reader would read them and like, oh, yeah, I know what that is. I know what a person who does that does, what they're usually like. And the pardoner, well, what was his thing? Well, he was a liar, and he was a crook, and he was trying to get your money. And so this is hundreds of years before Martin Luther that this was going on.
Yeah.
So, like, even just from a cursory knowledge of English literature, what he's saying doesn't add up.
And may I also cut in just to say, I think he tries to sort of obfuscate Luther's concerns by assigning them to a sort of German mindset, by kind of suggesting that the German Catholic Church has been a problem in the past and it has continued to be a problem in the present. Therefore, don't worry about it that much. They're always a problem. You see what I'm saying there?
I do see. I thought you were saying that, like, I get what you're saying. I thought you were saying that, like, it was Luther who was the crazy wild and out, but yeah, no, it does seem like he's saying, like, look, the German bishops are crazy. So, like, you know, Luther's complaining about the German bishops. Well, they're always like that. And yeah, that is just to kind of hand wave it away.
It also really underestimates Luther's understanding of Catholicism at the time. It kind of suggests that this is only a German problem. Luther actually became more critical of the church after his pilgrimage to Rome. It's not as if he was suddenly struck by the corruption of German priests, though that didn't help anything. It's more that he saw the decadence of the church and the hypocrisy in the city of Rome itself. So this is pre-internet. It's like, well, in the course of history, immediately post-printing press. So Luther probably had a broader horizon than this gentleman is giving him credit for. It's not as if Luther was just camped out in Germany for so long that he got Germany brain or whatever. It's that he saw the decadence of the Catholic Church in Rome, and then that intensified his criticisms.
Yeah, well, and remember some of the things that he saw when he was in Rome, right? There were, to this day, I believe, and a Roman Catholic in the comments can correct me, and I'll happily be corrected on this, but I think it still exists to this day, because I think this is one of the beefs that the East has with Rome. You can have, to this day, a private mass that you say for someone who is in purgatory. And Luther went to these little chapels where you could pay a priest to say a mass for a soul of one of your loved ones who was in purgatory. And one of the things that didn't even offend him at the time, because it was just so self-evident, like, of course you would do that. What offended him was the crass transactional nature of it that he saw in Rome, where it was a cottage industry for these guys, and they would say the mass as fast as they could so they could get through as many masses as they could. That was one of the things that piled on with the fact that many of these priests were not keeping their vows, shall we say.
That's one way of putting it.
Yes, and if you don't believe me, again, watch the Luther movie and how he says they had entire brothels just for clergy. You can say, oh, well, that's a movie, but the movie's actually pretty historically accurate.
It's not lying about what happened in history.
Yeah, and, then he famously bought an indulgence for his grandparents at the St. John of the Lateran Church. And so he saw all of this decadence, all of this selling the grace of God for money in Rome. You're right. The other thing that just, again, didn't make sense is like, okay, let's say that Alex's version of the story is true, that there was this practice happening in Germany, it was isolated to Germany, and that when Luther sounded the alarm, the church came and said, you're right, Luther, Germans, you stop doing that, bad Germans. Do you remember why Tetzel was selling indulgences?
Oh, please let me know. Shoot.
For St. Peter's Basilica.
Sure was.
Now, I'm sure you remember when the church gave all of that money back.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I mean, go to St. Peter's. It is just a rundown shack. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It's kind of hard to get away. Like, it's not like Tetzel cooked up the idea on his own. You could say that, yeah, he went overboard with it. And I actually appreciate Catholics who are willing to be honest and say, like, yeah, Tetzel was really just not an honest dude, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
But you are right. Like, he didn't just come up with the idea of like, oh, I'm just feeling compelled to make the church a bunch of money today. He was acting on the orders of somebody else. Now, he may have carried out those orders in a way that was not respectful to his orderer, but it doesn't change the fact that the idea came from above, you could say. And I'm not talking about from heaven.
Yes. And they kept the money.
Yes, that's the other thing. It wasn't as if those defrauded by Tetzel were made whole. They were ripped off and stayed ripped off, which is, of course, against the biblical injunctions against restoring that which has been stolen. So I kind of have a hard time thinking that this was an atomized Tetzel problem when he was the rotten fruit from a bad tree.
Yeah.
Yes, let us continue.
Yeah. Let me back it up real quick.
You're right about that, and you're right about 45 other things, 44 other points on your list here. But these things here, you're wrong about these things. So let's explain this to you. Martin Luther used the scandal of the abuse of indulgences. He used that as a pretext, right, to really radically change, and really, whether you want to say he wanted to or not, he wasn't intending to. He started something new. At first, he said, the abuse of indulgences, that's bad. And then the church fixed it, and he said, well, you know what? Indulgences themselves, they're bad. And now
You're saying he changed his mind.
And now the church is saying, no, Luther. Now you're not talking about abuse, and you're not even talking about ecclesial traditions. And that was the third category of traditions that we didn't even touch on. Ecclesial traditions is like the canons, the laws that the church has the authority given to it by Jesus Christ to bind its subjects to, like fasting rules and observing, feast days. Those are ecclesial traditions, and those can change as well, right?
Okay.
Martin Luther was not trying to just change, ecclesial traditions that he thought were not necessary. He wasn't just trying to change human apostolic traditions, because there were none left to change. He was trying to change the divine apostolic traditions. Martin Luther was trying to change the deposit of faith that Jesus Christ gave to the apostles. So, for example, he was trying to change like the sacraments. He was trying to say that we didn't need the priesthood. He was trying to say that you didn't need a ministerial priesthood. No, the ministerial priesthood is part of the divine apostolic deposit of faith. That cannot change.
Are you saying because that's the view is that the priesthood in the Old Testament followed into the New Testament priesthood?
No, a new priesthood, the priesthood of Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ.
But don't you guys believe that you're like the continuation of the temple and
the fulfillment,
the fulfillment, but also the continuation?
And all So all Christians would agree that Christianity is the fulfillment of the law of Moses.
Sure.
And in a sense, you could say it's the continuation.
The Levites being continued. Right. Got it.
But it's new. Hebrews makes it clear.
I keep having to pause it because there's just so much that he says that I'm like, I got to address this.
This is the, what's the term for it? I think it's Gishgalop is the term for just like making a rolling series of claims that take more time to disentangle than they do to make in the first place.
Yes, the Gish Gallop.
Yeah. You can cut that part out to make me look less dumb. Or you can leave this in and I will bear my foolishness. But if I may, can I speak to something really, this shouldn't take too long?
Go for it. I told you, we just
got to get through it eventually, right? Okay. His comment about the priesthood sort of struck me as odd.
Yes.
Because...
Is it because Rome doesn't have a ministerial priesthood?
There's that. But I was also just going to say, I think there are a lot of Lutheran groups now that would be very interested to hear that Martin Luther didn't believe in a ministerial priesthood. I know that you can sort of separate Luther and Lutheranism, kind of like people try to separate Calvin and Calvinism. But I do think that a lot of these Lutheran groups have almost like if let's say this is the spectrum and Baptists are over here and Catholics are over here. Presbyterians are probably here, and then Lutherans are probably here.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who's Lutheran. He's in a Lutheran seminary, and he would be very interested to know that Martin Luther didn't believe that priesthood was a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that the gentleman is sort of supposing this from Martin Luther's assertion of the priesthood of all believers, which is a very misunderstood idea. When we talk about the priesthood of all believers as Protestants, we're not saying that there is no room for ministers, or that there is no room for, as the Lutherans put it, priests. What we're saying is that you do not have to go through a specific human being to reach up to God. You go through Jesus Christ himself. And we're not saying that there's no such thing as a minister, or there's no such thing as a ministerial priesthood, to use his language.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a ministerial priesthood.
Right.
But neither does Rome. Rome has a sacerdotal priesthood.
Yes.
Rome's priesthood offers honest-to-goodness sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
And not just sacrifices, because we could say, like, well, when we worship, we're offering up sort of like the incense offerings in the Old Testament. Like, it's a sacrifice of praise, but it's not a sacrifice that takes away sins. Rome's priesthood offers sacrifices that take away sins.
Yes, and that is not what Paul is talking about when he talks about the sacrifice of our lips, right?
Yeah.
I think you're dead on there. There's a big difference between I'm offering a literal... I know that people will bristle at the term re-sacrifice. I understand that. But in the Mass, Jesus is offered again. You could play the word game and say, well, it's the same offering, it's just offered in a different time. Even allowing for that, it is still a satisfying sacrifice. It is a propitiation. Our sacrifice of praise is not the same thing. And I don't think that the Bible acknowledges the ongoing sacrifice. I think the Bible acknowledges that the sacrifice we offer in praise is what you said. It's sort of a debt of gratitude, not an actual satisfaction for sin, because that sin was cared for on the cross. That sin has been, as Hebrews puts it, once for all satisfied.
Yeah, and so the ministerial priesthood is like Anglicanism,
Yeah.
where Anglicans will even make this distinction. Like, we have a ministerial priesthood, we don't have a sacerdotal priesthood. Now, as with all things with Anglicanism, it depends on whether you're talking to an Anglo-Catholic or an evangelical Anglican or, goodness, the charismatic Anglicans.
That seems like it should be a contradiction. Yeah, that seems like it should be an inherent contradiction in terms, but what do I know?
Yeah, but what he's saying about the priesthood doesn't line up with Roman Catholic theology. So
No.
that was my big takeaway from his priesthood stuff. It also, I don't think, is the case that Martin Luther, it's like he portrays it as, well, Luther wanted a pretext for causing this big controversy. And so he used the scandal of the sale of indulgences as a way to blow the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And really, if you read Luther's writings from the time, it's like, hey, Holy Father, this thing is happening, and I'm sure that you didn't mean for it to happen, but this is happening and it's bad. And then he keeps getting pushback over and over and over again. And that pushback keeps pushing him further. He also, as looking at one of these, because wouldn't you know it, there was a guy named Desiderius Erasmus who published the first
He
Greek
put
New
one of those
Testament.
out, yeah.
Yeah, and so Luther could start digging into that, but I don't know. It seems like there's this, because Luther is viewed as this very scandalous, controversial figure amongst Roman Catholics, that that's the light that he's painting it in. And it's just not how I have read the history at all.
Yeah. I also, along the same lines, I wrote down a little note here because he said that Luther was starting something new. And I will say this in my little Protestant heart 150 million times until I'm blue in the face. The Reformers were not trying to start a new church. It is patently true that if you go back and read them, they are not trying to start something out of whole cloth. As a matter of fact, the entire project of Reformed theology, I really appreciate. I'm borrowing this language from our shared former professor, Dr. Kruger. He would say that Reformed theology is an attempt to get at meat and potatoes Christianity. It is an attempt to, let's strip away all the extra biblical stuff. Let's find out, based on Scripture, based on the interpretation of Scripture found in church history, because Protestants are not a historical people. Some of them think they are, but they shouldn't be. But anyway.
Did you hear the guy on the floor of the assembly that he said, to be Protestant is to be deep in history?
Yes, I have heard that one before. And that obviously is aping off of the, I can't remember which Catholic said that.
John Henry Newman.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But my whole point is Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, Butzer, all those guys, they are trying to find a refined Christianity. They're trying to find a version, not even a version of the gospel, but the version of the gospel, the true version of the gospel, based in what God has given us in His Word. And we have a rich history of understanding that, or at least attempting to understand that, in a way that I think is not recognized by a lot of these Catholic apologists. They will act like, well, Luther was angry at the church, and so he made a new one. And that's just not what he was going for. It is very disingenuous to that period in history. I mean, there is a reason that one of many battle cries of the Reformation was ad fontes, right? It was back to the sources. Let's see what the early church said. Let's see how they interpreted Scripture itself. And what you find, not in all of them, but in lots of church history, you will not find the systematized doctrines of the Catholic Church. You will find an effort to exposit the Bible. Again, that is not to say that history has one clear interpretation. There's differences there. And there are things in history that challenge us as Protestants. But what I wish the Catholic Church, or not the Catholic Church, but what the Catholic apologist would do is look at history and say, this isn't just a problem for Protestants. This also causes problems for me. Because what Luther was recovering, and it was a recovery project, is Christianity that is interested in Scripture first. And that, I think, is Protestantism in a nutshell. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to get triggered by that one little phrase. No. But I thought it was worth stopping and talking about for a second.
Yeah, no, that's That's fine. The other thing that stood out to me is when he said that indulgences were, what did he call them, divine traditions, that like there's ecclesiastical traditions, I forget what the other one was, and then there's divine traditions, and that indulgences are part of the deposit of faith. I know that Roman Catholics will like cry foul when I say that like you will not find indulgences in here. It's not there. And you know, I could be accused of, well, you're requiring sola scriptura and we reject that. Okay, fine. You're not going to find indulgences for centuries. And I'm being generous when I say centuries.
Yeah.
I think it's probably closer to 1,000 years. Like, the practice of indulgences comes from the belief that, like, well, Jesus's blood, I mean, one drop of Jesus's blood was sufficient to pay for the sins of the whole world, and yet, you know, he bled copiously, so there's all this extra merit. And, like, well, Mary never sinned. Forget the fact that she calls God her savior. Whatever. We'll push that to the side.
Sure.
I know they have an answer for that. It's a bad answer, but like
it does exist, but we don't have to talk about it right now.
But like, you know, Mary, since she never sinned, my goodness, there's all that extra merit. And, you know, the saints, they have, you know, some of them were really holy people. They had more than enough merit to get into heaven. What do we do with the extra merit? Well, there must be a place to keep it all. Naturally, of course. And you know, who would be able to open that treasury of merit and dispense the merits of Christ, Mary, and the saints? What would you use to unlock it and open it? It's the keys of the kingdom of heaven, of course. And who has the keys of the kingdom of heaven? According to them, only the Bishop of Rome. There's a whole bunch of steps that have to go into that, and it all has to be systematized. And, like, I'm not even saying that doctrinal development is bad, but that's a dog growing into, like, a Komodo dragon, okay?
Yeah.
And, like...
Well, and if I may cut in for half a second, I believe it was Newman, who you mentioned earlier, who gave us the vocabulary of the development of doctrine, which is sort of a bizarre thing, because on the one hand, he's Mr. To be deep in history is to cease to be Protestant. And on the other hand, he says, but we also believe in the development of doctrine, so, you know, we can discover new things about God as time goes forward. I don't necessarily, like, have a, well, I don't want to go too far with this. I don't have a problem with saying God can reveal truth through history, you know? But I do have a problem with the same person saying both things.
Yeah.
And I think you're right to say that the sale of indulgences was an embarrassment to the church that I think then sought a justification. And rather than just saying this is wrong and we shouldn't do it, they went for, well, it's actually okay, and it's been okay forever because of X, Y, and Z. When you mention the treasury of merit, something that I've never really gotten a straight answer on, if a Catholic in the comments wants to answer this, fantastic. Like, I'm not saying this doesn't have some sort of understanding, but to me, I've never had a straight answer on why doesn't the church make it their priority to just open the treasury of merit forever? Like, just, and you know, they'd probably say, well, that's what a mass is.
Have you been reading the 95 Theses?
I don't know, maybe.
Because there's one of them where Luther says that. He said, if the Pope could empty all of purgatory, why wouldn't he do it for love instead of money?
Yeah, because, I mean, it's sort of, that's where the transactionalism of it becomes especially icky in my mind. I'm sorry to use the word icky, but I think it gets the point across. The real scandal of indulgences to me is, why would you charge for something that you could give away for free as an institution that's supposed to be built on the generous love of Jesus? I've never really gotten an answer to that. I would love to know if that exists, but so far I can't come up with a solution to that.
And I think that their answer would be something along the lines of almsgiving is a good work, and so they're rewarding good works. But I mean,
it still seems like you're kind of holding out on people.
Yeah, I mean, trying to present the best version of it. It's odd that particular good work would have been chosen so much. Like he goes on to say in a part of the clip that we're totally not going to get to.
Yeah.
But he goes on to say that, like, indulgences are given today for things like reading your Bible, and they are. And it reminds me of the clip from Pirates of the Caribbean where the one guy says to the other, it's the Bible, you get credit for trying.
Yeah, you get points for trying. Yeah.
But it is odd that, like, almsgiving, is a very valued good work. And, I don't think that's a particularly Roman Catholic problem either. I think that there are a lot of Protestant churches that also value almsgiving in a disproportionate way. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's funny that particular one is the treasury is opened in exchange for that one a lot more liberally.
Yes, and I also think it kind of does present a rich versus poor problem where the treasury of merit is just more available to rich people. And I don't see that being the pattern of Scripture. Jesus himself said that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. The book of James says, "Wail, you rich, for the wages you have held back by fraud testify against you. Your gold is tarnished and your riches are moth-eaten." That does not seem to be the sort of language that comports with, well, if you give more money, you get more grace. That seems to be a really big problem for the sale of indulgences in general. Because why shouldn't, I mean, maybe this happens and I'm just ignorant to it, but why shouldn't a person who is charitable out of very little be rewarded with very much in the eyes of God? Which, that's not just a hypothetical, by the way, that is the story of the widow with her 2 mites from the Gospels. Jesus affirms that she gave out of what she had, and because of that, her reward will be great. If somebody shows up with 2 copper pennies to Tetzel, they're getting a very, very small indulgence or none at all. And I don't see that coming together. I don't see that reconciling itself.
Yeah. And, I think that it's also important to remember that while the Roman Catholic Church eventually did say, you can't just straight up sell these, I think he's also getting the history wrong there too, because I think when they said that was at the Council of Trent. And the Council
that was quite a bit later.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Luther wasn't alive when they called the Council of Trent.
I don't think he was, because that was like 1550s, right?
Yeah, or 1540s, I thought, yeah. Like, it's the story doesn't quite add up. And unfortunately, we're going to have to end it here because both of us are pastors and both of our churches, I think, have Wednesday evening festivities. And I have the joy of working through Psalm 106 here in about 30 minutes, which if you don't know Psalm 106, read it and you'll see I'm sort of saying that tongue in cheek.
Yeah, good luck. Good providence. My apologies. Good providence to you.
Yes. But, Lord willing, hopefully, if I haven't run you off yet, the 2 times I've had you on here, then hopefully we can get you back on and we can talk about more SEC football. And we'll all, as a channel, we will cheer for the Auburn Tigers unless they're
amen.
The Tennessee Volunteers. And going back to General Assembly, by the way, I so much wanted to say Teaching Elder Jonathan Brooks, Go Big Orange Presbytery, but I thought that might have been frowned upon.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how much of a sense of humor does the assembly have at that moment. If you say that on Tuesday night, you probably get a laugh. If you say that on Thursday night, probably not so much.
Yeah.
Also, let's get Alex on here. I would love to have this discussion with him, too.
Yeah, well, and then, we can all commiserate about the low points of our respective football programs.
Okay.
But then also, have this great ecumenical unity that we have between,
there you go.
Two PCA guys and an ARP, and
that we are not in conflict with, shockingly. He's not anathema to us. Also, if I may have one final indulgence, pun intended, about Auburn football, I do want to point out nobody hates Auburn more than Auburn fans. And
have you watched the SEC Shorts Auburn fan experience?
Yes, and it is true. It is frighteningly true.
Yeah.
And we're going to pull the lever again this year and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, they could make another one all about Tennessee football. That's it. It is life in the South in the fall, and as all of you watching can tell, both Matt and I are itching for fall to hurry up and get here so that we can watch our teams make
and
us
so that
cry.
It's not so we can watch our teams make us cry, and so it's not 95 degrees outside anymore.
That as well. Let us know in the comments what your favorite football team. No, I'm kidding.
You could.
You could. Let us know in the comments what you think about what we have said. As always, like I said on the show with Nate and Ryan, treat the comment section like it is the floor of the General Assembly. Be respectful and courteous towards other people, and we'd love to hear from you. And until next time,